the Around the NFL podcast. Believes in your franchise quarterback. Well, maybe not that guy.
From the Chris Wessling Podcast Studio, it is Around the NFL bonus episode.
Hey now.
Dan Hanzus here, Gregg Rosenthal, Marc Sessler. Boys, this is something that we've been wanting to do. We were just looking for the right window to do it, and at the quarter pole-ish, it feels like a good time to check in with the QB Index, which is a column for NFL.com that has been in very good hands through the years. In fact, on today's program, I'm the only one that hasn't written the QB Index.
You're writing it next year.
Yeah, well, over my dead body. But I've done power rankings, but it was a Chris Wessling joint, RIP. It was a Gregg Rosenthal joint. It then was a Marc Sessler joint. And then this offseason, he handed the reins to a man we're going to welcome in right now. He needs no introduction, actually, because you see him every Sunday night on the flagship program. He just got in a pump, and he's a busy man. He's getting worked to death. We're going to talk to Ely about that, by the way, in the newsroom. Nick Shook. He is the man, the myth, the writer of the NFL QB Index. Hi, buddy.
Hello, fellas. How are we doing today?
That was very Damashek of you. Hello, fellas. I love that we got you at the quarter pole, because that was the week when I would do the QB Index year after year that I would officially, like, I would put it in the notes that you take away any previous thoughts of, like, how good this quarterback is, and it's just about 2023 alone. And it's a big enough sample size that it's like, okay, now I don't feel so bad. Like this year, for instance, totally burying Joe Burrow behind some nobodies. You got to just evaluate it on this year, and this year it's not pretty.
What a little shot below the knees right at Shook before he could say a word.
No, you're going to see a ton of that this week. I felt the same way. I looked back and I was like, you know what? Look, it's been a month. They haven't done anything offensively with Joe Burrow. It's time to bury him. So I'm glad that you know,
I would have even more, but we'll get to that later.
So, Shook. The assignment itself, by the way, before we get into the top 10, with power rankings, the criticism could be withering from outside. And quarterbacks, people are it's a very personal subject, a quarterback for a sports fan and their favorite team. So I would imagine it gets pretty personal in your timeline. People don't take kindly, like maybe Bengals fans, of a guy that's a Browns writer of the QB Index, burying one of the generational players at QB at this stage of the season. You get a lot of heat for this?
Yeah, it's too bad that I don't have a better professional picture of me actually doing my job other than when I was with the Browns and our great photographer there, Matt Starkey. Shout out to him. Because that's my banner photo on my Twitter page, and I can't tell you how many times people get in the mentions and go, look at this guy, he's a Browns fan.
You got to change it. I think you got to change it.
You do have to change it.
Yeah, instead have you doing a pump, and you'll get a lot less.
Don't, because everybody wants to now pretend that they're not fans. I like that you're a fan. Not a shot at you, Mark.
I'm not pretending anything, but I would say, Shook, the other problem you have is
be proud, Shook.
It's also 5 years old. You got to update it.
When you're burying like someone like
who? Me?
Shook. He's 5 years old.
I think I got to update mine as well. It's time. Go ahead, Mark.
The benefits.
I was gonna say when you have Burrow like way down there, it's like people don't read the intro to these articles.
No.
Or any context around what's happening. They just think that you're in outer space dropping like an all-pro level quarterback in the middle of nowhere, and it's like it is based on what's happened in these recent weeks, my friends.
Yeah,
it's a rough existence.
I considered writing an intro about Kirk Cousins a couple of weeks ago, but I just decided to fold it into his little blurb because I was getting a lot of hate for not including Kirk Cousins in the top 10 when he was, near the top of the league. And statistically, I've had people in my Instagram mentions or my DMs calling me ignorant, telling me I should be fired, going to lengths beyond that for my opinions on this thing. But look, guys, most of you aren't watching every game. You're watching your favorite team's game.
Fools.
I've watched every game.
Fools.
So
there's a lot of got to bite your tongue because so much of the criticism comes from dumb, naive, ignorant
Yeah, but
people.
we have been watching all the games, and we're going to come at you with flamethrowers.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. Yes, this will be honest criticism, but with respect for the man that does the work, watches the game, and then compiles the list thoughtfully. Let's start with the top 10. And we'll work our way downward. Let's take a look at it right here. Josh Allen. Yes, that shouldn't be a surprise because who's playing better than this man in the last 3 weeks? Week 1, an aberration. Here we go. Number 2, Tua. Number 3, Pat Mahomes, even after a clunker on Sunday night. Lamar Jackson, 4. Jalen Hurts, 5. Justin Herbert, 6, down 2 spots. Brock Purdy at 7. Dak at 8. Matthew Stafford at 9. And look at that. Isn't that funny? Why don't we start there? Jared Goff and Matt Stafford back-to-back in 2023 in the QB Index. Mark, I'd be curious your thoughts about this because you were writing this when Goff had kind of his reinvention with the Lions. Goff is an easy guy to put in the top 10 because who's been more consistent than him this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think Goff last year, like when he started to really statistically rise up and like was a different version that you have to like separate everything you kind of think about Jared Goff into what you're actually seeing. And like in that offense, he fits so well. And I think he cracked my top 10 by the end of the season. But it was one where you're just like, you're going to get flamed no matter what you do with a Jared Goff. Someone's going to disagree with these, Nick.
I think so much of this is, at least the perception of it, is built on reputation, which is actually, oddly enough, how the first month usually looks until you get to this point. But Jared Goff has consistently outperformed his reputation. I mean, even going back to week 1, I was surprised to see so many people in my mentions saying, I can't believe the Lions won despite how Jared Goff played. He didn't lose them the game. In fact, he put them in multiple positions to win the game. That's what he's done for the majority of this year. The only big mistake he made was turning the ball over in that overtime loss to the Seahawks. Otherwise, he's operating this offense. He's probably playing some of the best football of his career. Yeah, it's not spectacular Josh Allen level stuff, but it's consistent, it's reliable, and they're winning football games because of it. So I feel pretty good about him being in the top 10.
It's clean. I think he's played better this year on balance because I think he's been more consistent, to your point, than he did a year ago. But I would have him and Stafford still quite separate. When I looked at the rankings, because initially I just looked at him last week, and you had Stafford in the middle of the pack, and now you've bumped him up to 9. He's someone, and I know you're not doing enough stats because his stats aren't great, like touchdown interception. That's why I never like pass rating. Touchdown interception just not great. I mean, it's a bullet point to pay attention to, but if you're watching Stafford week after week, as you are, I'm just so impressed with the quality of throws, and it's so hard in this exercise to divorce him from the situation, but I think in just terms of high-level quarterbacking, what he's doing, he's a top 5 quarterback to me so far this year. Even before last week, I know he had the okay to bad Bengals game, but in 3 out of 4 weeks, I think you can look at the way he's played, and in that week, he is up there with the Josh Allens and the Mahomes for me right now, so I'd push him up even a little bit higher, but I'm glad you got him into the top 10.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, Greg, is I don't even disagree with you. It's just that he came from the middle of the pack, and if he hadn't had that bad week 3 game, he'd be up there right now. And you know, it's funny because you say you try to divorce them from the situation, but you have to consider the situation in which he's operating right now. I mean, look at his receivers. It's Puka Nacua and it's Tutu Atwell. He's got Ronnie Rivers taking handoffs in the backfield. Kyron Williams is their lead back, and a remade offensive line that's playing better than I anticipated that they would. And most importantly, he's healthy. He looks really good. He looks like old Matt Stafford. He's pushing them to victories right now.
In some ways better, maybe. In some ways better. Like I think he's like kind of taken the things he's learned over the years, and physically he's still great right now. At least we'll see about the hip, but I think he's playing as well as he did in the 2021 playoffs. Put it that way.
Mark, throw out in this top 10 someone whose placement surprises you.
Well, you've mentioned the Matthew Stafford. Can I actually give you credit for Brock Purdy? Because I feel like other people would take Brock Purdy, and just because of the offense that he's in, the environment, like that we all get it, it may inflate the Jimmy Garoppolos of the world and other quarterbacks. Like Brock Purdy, I don't know what else he needs to do. He may not be as physically impressive as the person above him, Justin Herbert. But what more at this level do you need to do to produce? He was 20 for 21 a week ago. He distributes the ball all over the place. Like he's, I think, to be a 7th-round pick and to be what he's done since week 14 of last year, this is like a pristine performance by a quarterback no one expected it. At number 7, I think other people just sort of drop him out of the top 10 because of the, I guess, certain things that you just assume coming in. Like Brock Purdy deserves number 7.
And to kind of dovetail off that, Shook, it kind of is – in terms of what you do, it's interesting to me. How do you factor in when you make this list? You know, the setup around him, the environment. Like, you obviously aren't dinging Brock Ford to have him in the top 10. I'd probably have him outside the top 10 because of that reason, but I wouldn't have him buried either because he's still playing at a high level.
Yeah, you know what matters to me so much, and I think this is extremely applicable with Brock Purdy, is are you hurting your team? That's the first thing I need to check off the list. If you're not hurting your team, all right, then we're in the positive territory. Are you helping your team win games? All right, that's the next positive, area. That's are you executing the offense? Are you winning games for your team? Those are the three different levels that I kind of consider
Wins are a QB
when
stat.
I watch these guys. And that's the thing is they're not, but you can help push your team to a victory with your performance. What he's doing right now is executing this offense exactly as it's intended. I think that if he was in some other situations, he wouldn't be as good, but you could say that about most anybody. And more than anything, he's playing clean football. It's kind of like Jared Goff in a sense, except that it's much more effortless even than the Lions offense that the 49ers is. I mean, yeah, he's got a lot of talent around him, of course, but he's calm, he's cool, he's collected. He's somebody I enjoy watching because the confidence in that pocket right now, sometimes to a fault occasionally, it's just so remarkable for a guy who's so young. He plays it like he's a 10-year veteran. He's not hurting them. He's throwing the ball downfield to Brandon Ayuk. He's dumping it off on time to Christian McCaffrey. It's just a well-oiled machine, and a lot of that has to do with a guy who executes it perfectly, and it makes a lot of sense why they committed to him in the offseason.
It's so funny, though, because we just went through this 5-year debate about Jimmy G in the exact same offense, and it's like an A/B test because I think you can see pretty clearly he's better than Jimmy G. I think he is, and he has a higher ceiling than Jimmy G. Now, Jimmy G, just by wins-losses, by EPA per play, was a Hall of Famer. I mean, just by those stats. I mean, if he was healthy. But, like, in terms of, like, the EPA per play, he was top 4 every year. Touchdown, interception, wins, losses, top 5 every year.
Still uncomfortable just even putting Garoppolo in Hall of Fame in this.
Right, no, and I'm not.
I know what you're saying.
So that's why, and I think you can look at Purdy, and I think you can see him a little better. And I was like, Dan, I saw that, and I'm like, oh, that's too high for Purdy. Because to me, I think you look at Stafford, you look at Hurts, I would even throw Cousins. I would actually throw Geno in there. This is where it gets murky, and Stroud. And you think, is he making the guys around him better? Is he elevating the offense? Is he doing high-level quarterback stuff? But then I decided to be fair to you, actually make my own list. And in the end, it's like, actually, no, I still would have him ahead of Dak and ahead of Goff. Yeah. And I have him around 11 or 12. It's not that big of a difference from 8 or 9, like a few spots. It does hurt me to see him below Stafford. It hurts me.
We got 12 minutes into the show until Greg said we're going to work off his list now so we can say goodbye to you. Thank you again. See you Sunday night.
I mean, you got to make the list. It's like people who say, oh, that's a snub. You snubbed him from the Pro Bowl. Well, then tell me what you would have put him in. So I had to make my own rankings. Then I realized, you know what? It's not that
All
crazy.
right, that's a good theory and a way to do it. Before we move into the middle tier and anybody else jump in, I want to give you a shout out here for Jalen Hurts, and he has not moved from next week. You had him number 5 last week, number 5 this week. It almost felt like the Salem witch trials, the hysteria around the passing game of the Eagles and all that stuff. Like, that's fine. This is a top 5 quarterback. They're figuring things out. You saw that against Washington. The passing game with A.J. Brown was unstoppable. Devonta Smith had a huge play. Like, I'm feeling very good about Hurts. And that's respect for Mahomes, obviously, keeping him in the top 3, despite him not being a top 3 producer through 4 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. This is the first time that I had Mahomes out of the top 2, and it felt justified because of the game that he had in New York. But the body of work overall, he's had a spectacular game against the Bears, kind of middling stuff otherwise, a tough one, even though they won that game against the Jets. So, I mean, he's still that guy.
He played great in week 1, though. I thought, like, that's the thing. To me, he would have stayed in the top 2. You're right, the Jets game was bad. I mean, last week was bad. But before that, like, I know the numbers, I guess, weren't there, but who's outplaying him? Maybe Allen, maybe Tua, so that makes sense.
You said one big, I just mean from numbers, statistically one big game, and he's been okay as a producer, but that's not just what this list is about, and I like that. Mark, anything else before we move on?
No, I want to move on.
All right.
I got something in the next tier. That's for
all right, we'll start you off then. Let's check out the second tier here. Number 11, down 2 spots, Kirk Cousins. Geno Smith at 12, down 6. Greggy's sharpening his fangs.
No, I'm impressed he had Geno at 6 going into week 4, so I love you for that.
Same.
How about this, Texans fans? You got a new world because C.J. Stroud is up 7 spots to 13. Sam Howell up 11. He washes that 4-pick game out of his mouth and moves up to 14. Baker, 15. and Shook, the Browns fan, is feeling good about that. Russell Wilson down 2 to 16. Anthony Richardson, I don't like that. We'll talk about it. 17. Trevor Lawrence down 7 to 18. Woof. Justin Fields 19 and Jordan Love down 5 spots to 20. I should mention Justin Fields up 12 spots to 19. So do the math. He was buried at the bottom of this list before week 4. Mark, what are you seeing?
All right, I do. We should talk about Anthony Richardson. That's a tough one in this exercise, and like this is gonna be an interesting season to see where he goes on this list. Trevor Lawrence, to me, I just think that like I don't see a quarterback that's lesser than last season, but I do see a lot of. I think he's got some of the top drops in the league in terms of like not being helped by his wideouts. He set some tough situations in the red zone and the ed zone. I think like Trevor Lawrence, to me, I would comfortably put him above like the Sam Howell, the Baker Mayfield, the Russell Wilson of the world, above Geno, frankly. And part of me, and this is why I struggle with this exercise a little bit, is I couldn't separate like who I truly believe Trevor Lawrence is from maybe some up and down performance of the offense. And like I'd move these guys all around during the exercise of it. But Lawrence to me just stands out. I think he's PFF's number 2 quarterback. That's a different metric. Let them do their thing. But
wow, that's a little showy by PFF.
It's a little showy, but like I think but Trevor Lawrence like has just not been that different from the guy that I came into the season loving personally. So Nick, I wonder what brought you to the point of putting him down at 18.
Yeah, I think it goes back to Gregg's point that after a month of football, you kind of reorganize based on what they've done this year. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. That was one of the more difficult ones. And it's why, as you know, producer Eric copied and pasted my spreadsheet that I made. Do you guys like my color coordination? It's pretty good, right?
You are much more organized than I
Wow,
was
look at that.
Yeah,
Whoa,
look at that.
you have the team color? That was you?
Oh, yeah.
I
did
thought
all
that was
Google
Roberts.
Sheets, baby. No,
Wow,
that was me.
beautiful,
And so I
gorgeous.
caution putting the move week by week in there. It's really for my own tracking than anything, but I thought, hey, why not send it over? Because it looks drastic with some guys. Like Lawrence didn't have a 7-spot drop worthy performance last week. It's just that after a month where he started, where I've kind of kept him based on a mix of reputation and performance, and then now just looking at this season, I just feel like they're not quite there yet. And it's really not his fault. Mark's completely right. There were some near misses. There were some drops. There were some issues. The offense has just really not gotten completely going. But at the same time, I know who he is. And I know that eventually they're going to get there. They just haven't put together complete performances as an offense with Lawrence so far. And that's not entirely his fault, but that's just where he stands.
I'd push back, though, because I can get why PFF has – I'm surprised he's 2.
Seems high.
But they're grading
You know what
him-
I'm saying, by the way.
Right. But
It's
they're
like
just
that's
grading –
PFF almost like, look at us. We
No,
see
but
the game.
they're
Here's the second best quarterback in football
Like,
this year.
Andy Dalton,
But they're-
2022.
I used to try to do this too. I had my own little system to it that I didn't think was scientific, but it was my system of you grade each player, you grade positives, negatives, and they're looking at Lawrence, and I kind of know which quarterbacks end up doing well in their system. It's quarterbacks who don't make bad throws. He doesn't do that. That on a play-to-play basis, if you just grade him, isn't having many negatives and is going to have a lot of positives. And I still see that with him this year. Now, 2 is a step too far for me, but I think he's running the offense they're asking, and occasionally maybe he's getting rid of the ball too quickly, not holding on for that extra beat and looking for something downfield. It's almost like he's anticipating that he's got a bad offensive line, and they do have a bad offensive line. So I would have him lower, but I would have him in the top 10. Because I think he's playing at quite a high level. To me, he would be in the Goff, Geno area, and I'd put him maybe a little higher than that, right at the back end of the top 10, even just on this season, because I think it's more the offense and what's been around him that's hurting his numbers.
And you know the other product of this is, too, because that's essentially where he was prior to this week. It's the reshuffling of other guys that just knocks some guys down.
Yeah.
Moving Stafford up, moving Howell back up, who's been the most volatile player in this entire group so far. Eventually, guys just kind of slide down, and then you look at it, you reorder a little bit more, and you think, okay, after a month, that's kind of where they are, even though I know Trevor's a better player than that ranking right now.
I think he did a really good job here with what you call the middle class to the upper middle class. I would maybe personally have Richardson a little higher because I think he's shown himself to be a playmaker, but durability is part of the gig as well.
I thought you were going to say you wanted Richardson lower. I like that.
I mean, like
this is Dan's guy.
Yeah, I mean, up around Cousins and Geno is
okay.
I think he should be I just think he's done a lot in a little amount of time. But the playing time is in part because he's been hurt, and that's a problem as well.
I love Howell, Mayfield, Russ back to back to back because they're all comps for each other.
Right.
right, they all remind me of each other, and it's interesting to look at them. That is your Dalton line right now. That is kind of the middle, at least, of the NFL right now.
Shook, you nailed it.
Howell, Mayfield, Wilson. And how about C.J. Stroud? I don't think anyone's arguing. I'm not. That seems perfect for his spot. But
I'd put him above Geno even. So
yeah, what a month out of him.
Spot too low.
And Kirk.
Similar,
Right.
I think.
Put him right on the doorstep of the top 10. That's glorious.
It's funny. Those three actually remind me of each other a little bit stylistically too, just in terms of how they win, what they do well. Tell us what you just seen in C.J. Stroud, just what you liked about him.
Accuracy, poise, confidence in an offense that suits him perfectly. He's throwing guys open. He looks like he's been in the league for 5 years.
Yeah.
They're winning because of him. He looks way better than even I anticipated. And the Texans are a fun watch because he's playing quarterback right now. And, that was a big jump to move him up there, but I felt he completely earned it. And the only difference really, like you kind of get a Stroud and Richardson sandwich here with those three guys that are similar comps in between. And the only reason is because Richardson hasn't been in every game and, the durability thing. That's it. That's the only reason. Otherwise, C.J. Stroud right now, like we've talked about, this week, leading candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year, and I think Richardson's going to make a strong play for that. If Richardson continues to play like this, they're going to be neck and neck in these rankings throughout the year.
The only one I'm seeing here that maybe bumping up against a little bit before we move on, Jordan Love you have at 20. I would imagine for you he's been a kind of a tough evaluation because he's shown really exciting moments and moments of leadership and playmaking. But also he's had a lot of his core missing, and there have been some dry spots. Thursday night against the Lions last week was not great shakes. Has he been a little tough for you to play so far?
Yeah, he just hasn't played a complete game yet. There's been flashes where he's gone out there and led them back to victory against the Saints and done some really good things, some exciting things. But watching him is kind of an unhinged experience because he doesn't quite have everything together underneath him, and he'll try to make the superhero play a little bit too often. And then he kind of settles down, shorter passes, gets into a rhythm, and then suddenly that offense is unlocked and he finds success. It's just not complete and consistent over a 4-game stretch so far, but I like what I see from him. I think he's got a bright future.
And I'll just make a quick note before we move to the back end that we're recording this ahead of TNF kickoff week 5, so don't get fired up about Fields and Howell's placement if they do something marvelous or terrible on Thursday.
Very possible with those two quarterbacks.
Yes. So this is all through week 4, and now let's move to the bottom of the barrel is not fair, but this is the bottom third of the QB index. Ryan Tannehill up 8 spots, so he was buried, but he moves up to 21. Derek Carr drops 1 spot to 22. Joe Burrow, that's the conversation that we hinted at it early on, and we should get back into it. Down 11 to 23. Aiden O'Connell, the Raiders rookie, 24. Look at Joe Burrow just ahead of Aiden O'Connell. What a world. Josh Dobbs, 25, up 3 spots. Zach Wilson, after showing signs of life on Sunday Night Football, up 6 to 26. Bryce Young, the first overall pick at 27, down 1 spot. Mac Jones takes a nosedive after the Cowboys debacle, down 9 spots to 28. Kenny Pickett down 7 spots after a rough one against Houston to 29. Daniel Jones, another dirt nap, down 7 to number 30.
Ouch.
After a wipeout on Monday Night Football. Desmond Ridder more or less stays where he is at number 31, rightfully so. And, yeah, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Shooky, watched that game yesterday, and that was a tough debut for DTR. Get well soon, Deshaun Watson. Where is Deshaun Watson? So he's off the list because he.
So can I I don't hope they're helping you out here more. Last year, when Jalen Hurts went out for a week and Minshew came in 2 weeks, you have to you would act like Jalen Hurts doesn't exist. And suddenly Gardner Minshew comes into the lineup, and I'm sure they've corrected this because it would cause me 4 or 5 days of utter havoc. But, Jalen Hurts was hanging out at 1 or 2, and then he goes out, and it's like they put out Marc Sessler's top 10 QB list, and Jalen Hurts isn't even in the top 10, and there isn't an asterisk that says injured players not shown. And it's just suddenly everyone east of the Mississippi is taking out a verbal machine gun to take me out. So I hope for your sake that's not happening.
Can I just say, and I'm sure it is happening, Shook, still, but that's how the sausage gets made, but I would say maybe a conversation with Ali Bumpuri.
No, he was
get these guys into the list.
He was very receptive, so this isn't like me a year later trying to.
No, I'm saying let's get Deshaun just because he missed a week.
But you can blame me because that was I started QB Index. And this was my policy. But you could change the policy because I wanted to write about who just played.
I get it.
You wanted if a rookie, you waited till the week after. But if you have a rookie playing his first game, you want to write about how he looked, and so you would.
And when you're writing about these guys, like 18, 19 weeks in a row, getting a fresh face in there is not
that was part of it.
Writing 22 blurbs about Derek Carr, I'm ready to like jump off a cliff at some point.
This is definitely an offline conversation.
Okay, anyways.
No. See, the thing is, you guys, what you're doing is I'm taking a lot of bullets every week with this, and I know that's part of the job. But you just gave me like a handful of smoke grenades. Incredible cover. I'm moving from one bunker to the next right now. Thank you guys.
I couldn't believe how low Josh Dobbs was. And this is where I think if you're getting to week 5, maybe more than any player on this list, you're just evaluating how he's played on a week-to-week basis. I think he's number 2 in the NFL ESPN QBR in terms of rushing value. He's like middle of the pack overall, but rushing value. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. He's been a great runner, great decision maker, I would say. Been accurate. He doesn't have all the pop in his arm and all that, and the production's been good, not great. To me, he's up there in the maybe ahead even of the Dalton line in terms of how he's.
All right, Greg, where you have him on your rankings.
Just then.
Go ahead.
But he reminds me of this year's
I'd like to see where
he's like this year's Jacoby Brissett, who like people were like, no, I'm not believing what I'm seeing.
Right.
Like, he's not producing. But it's
not
like,
as high as maybe I'm making it sound. I had him 17, so a little higher, 17, 16, right near Russ and Baker.
And you have him at 25.
To me, he's right in that group where, man, he's playing some good ball.
He would have sat there if he hadn't had accuracy issues in the first half in week 4. That was the biggest drawback to me was that he missed a number of open guys over the middle early in that game as they fell behind. He was erratic, and in the win over the Cowboys, he did his job well. The rushing value really showed in that game, but it wasn't necessarily a game where he had to go throw them to victory as much as he did his job, did it well. So I think that if he were to put together a type of game that he had in the second half against the 49ers in a full game in the week ahead, you'll see him rise back up. He's the one guy where I want to keep nudging him. Just
come on. I mean, there's no way Joe Burrow's played better than him this year, for instance.
No.
Or Carr or Tannehill. That's all I'm saying.
It's a tough assignment, though.
It is. No, it's not. He knows it's not personal.
Yeah. How about Bryce Young? I feel like this is shaping up as a tricky one. A tricky one for Panthers fans. For Bryce Young, you're probably feeling a lot of frustration because there are quarterbacks in your class who are thriving that were taken right behind you. Not only are you dealing with injury issues, the surrounding talent is not at a high level. Is he a difficult evaluation again because of the injuries and the supporting cast? Like, what are you seeing from him as a quarterback so far?
Yeah, situation does matter. I also think this is an uninspired offense under Frank Reich and his staff so far. They're not doing him a lot of favors, but he's also not doing himself a lot of favors. He's playing too much superhero ball, trusting his physical attributes that found success at Alabama that are not going to create the same positive plays in the NFL. I think about that strip sack that he gave up, that basically swung the game on Sunday against the Vikings. It was a play where you just take the sack. You see the rush in your face, you take the sack. He tried to get rid of the ball, tried to evade the tackler. He fumbled. It was returned for a touchdown. Those are the types of mistakes where he just thinks he can do everything and he can't quite do everything and hasn't learned it yet. And then the situation also matters as well. Doesn't have the best supporting cast. So I think that he has a positive, bright future. It's just that, you got to understand, you got to play a little bit more within yourself at this point.
I look at the bottom and I forget DTR here, but Bryce Young, Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett, Daniel Jones, Desmond Ridder. I wish I could come at you with something, but I don't have a huge problem with that at all. This is where these guys belong right now.
Well, a couple of those guys have bad offensive lines and poor schemes. Kenny Pickett being one of those. It's a combination of the two in Pittsburgh. It feels like every third down they face is 3rd and 12 or longer. I think he's starting to see ghosts because he doesn't trust his offensive line. Daniel Jones was mauled on Monday night. I felt bad for him because you do see glimpses of him, but overall he has not lived up to the expectation. And then Mac Jones, another guy who tries to do a little bit too much, throwing a pass across the field, getting picked off, throwing an ugly interception later, getting strip sacked from behind, trying to evade. It was a really rough game for him. It wasn't as ugly as I thought it was going to be, statistically speaking. But then I look back and I was like, man, this is not a good trend for him right now. He has not settled in at all.
Yeah, let's circle back to Burrow because I think, again, being a veteran at listicles here at NFL.com, it's kind of a good one for you because that's the headline. Burrow drops into the bottom tier or whatever.
To the netherworld.
And you can back it up statistically. You can back it up with the eye test. And before people can, get on you, including Bengals fans, you say, listen, you're seeing it. This is not Joe Burrow. I mean, his name is Joe Burrow. He still looks like a full-grown Macaulay Culkin. Like, he still looks like Joe Burrow. But the player, robbed of his athleticism is not the same player. And you could even argue, Shook, you could put him lower because of how stilted and really DOA this offense is with this type of quarterback right now. I've been vocal about he should be out of the lineup until he gets a little bit better or a lot better, but they seem determined to have him play through this tough one.
We are bordering on gross negligence on the part of the Bengals right now with Joe Burrow because he is not physically capable of being the player that he wants to be, that he's gotten to this point in his career by being. He can't move. He's a statue in the pocket. He's like Tom Brady in the pocket, except he doesn't have Tom Brady's pre-snap abilities and cannot deliver the same way Tom Brady did without getting out and running. It's not that Joe Burrow is a mobile quarterback per se, but his ability to extend plays, navigate the pocket, and then pick up rushing, positive gains when he needs to is part of what makes him great. And instead, he's stuck behind an offensive line that's okay. That's not great, but is okay, is not doing him any favors. Neither is the fact that the Bengals, for some reason, don't want to run the football with Joe Mixon other than on the first drive of the game. Their play calling has done him no favors. They're asking him to do way too much right now, and that's why you're getting this stagnant offense where Joe Burrow looks rather mortal instead of some superhuman deserving of the highest contract in the NFL.
It's backing up where he puts him. I like it.
That was very I don't know if you happen to hear the Flea-like bass line or something that was in the background there, but Shook just went through it like
that was Flea. We actually paid him $400 to lay that down underneath.
That was a phone vibrating on the table.
That's what that was.
Shook, it's about the illusion, my friend. Show me.
I thought it was great. That was it was like C.J. Stroud ignoring the pressure in the pocket. I just want to say a shout out. I'm with you on where you put Tannehill, but just
by the way, that was Nick Wessling calling you angry about Joe Burrow.
And also seeing I was right about Stroud. The Wesleys were high on Stroud, but they're high on every Ohio State player.
Can we talk Tannehill real quick?
Yeah.
Sure.
You know what I'm going to call him now? From now on, Diet Kirk Cousins, because, he's not as delicious as a classic Coca-Cola. He just gets the job done when you want the taste of Coke, but you don't want the calories or all the sugar. That's Diet Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, who's been very up and down this year. When he has time to throw and they're able to build out of the run, play action, he's good. Yep. He's never going to be great. When he doesn't have time to throw, he's a nightmare. It's a disaster. And that's what his season's been so far.
Like that Browns game, when I rewatched, I was like, I don't put much of this on Tannehill. I actually think he played okay in that game. He was a bit of a disaster week one, but he's been strong since. And I have a soft spot in my heart because QB Index started. It was my first year at the NFL. I was still living in New York. QB Index started as a project to watch the great quarterback class of 2012. Coaches film every week and rank them and just go through their games every week. So it was RG3, it was Luck, it was Russ, who's still on this list, it was Tannehill, it was Brandon Weeden, and then Nick Foles snuck in there with a couple starts in the mix too. And Tannehill, I really love him because I think he's really developed so much as a quarterback. Back then he was just sort of a guy who threw the ball straight and a big, strong athlete and barely played the position. And now here we are. How many seasons later? 14 to 12 seasons later. And he's still kicking on this list. Russ is still kicking. The column's still kicking in much different form with a much bigger, stronger writer behind the helm who's doing a great job. Good job, Shooky.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. That was real nice.
Any other thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, I think part of this exercise, because people are just going to look at the list. That's it. They get all upset. They run around their farmstead or wherever they live. But the actual, it's 32 boiled down, thick graphs on each player that come from a lot of film study. A lot of work goes behind it. You got to prove your point like you just did on Burrow. But you got to add a little spice to the writing. We got to know who Nick Shook is versus the last writer or the writer previous or whoever comes next. And Shook, I've read each one of these, and I just want to say the writing and your whimsical nature with some of the entries is part of the delight. So don't just look at the list. Read the whole thing, reader.
Well said.
That's a good sales pitch. I appreciate you.
Well said.
Got it.
He's just a kid from Akron. Don't change your Twitter photo.
I mean, but at some point, it's false advertising. You don't want to be one of those guys that's, got the 5-year-old picture.
Yeah, but look at his buy and try.
Probably looks better today.
Look at
that's what I mean.
On the left sleeve. So he's interviewing. Who's the player he's interviewing there?
It's Larry Ogunjobi.
Okay, Ogunjobi.
3 teams ago.
Yeah, Larry. You're interviewing a guy named Larry. And look on the left arm, the way the sleeve hugs the buy and the try. Now, do we want to, if we want to get some people off your back, do you want to Photoshop the Browns helmet off the breastplate there? Sure,
Yeah,
you can do that.
right?
But I would not get away from the photo because it really checks a lot of boxes otherwise.
I'm not going to lie. I have a backpack that I got from the Browns when I still work for the team, and I've thought about sewing an NFL patch over it on multiple occasions for this very reason.
Shook, never changed. Thank you for this, and we really did want to highlight the great work you're doing and the NFL QB Index, because who doesn't love chopping up the quarterbacks? And check out Shook on Twitter at the Nick Shook. Hell, check out his Twitch handle, the Nick Shook.
Yeah,
And
it's all uniform.
Check them out in a big spot while we're in London, bringing that Sunday night Week 6
true.
recap home with Patrick.
Yeah, I'm
Leba.
glad that we can add more work to your plate. It sounds like you're not doing enough, Nick, so good job.
Thank you for giving me a platform to defend myself before they come out. It's the game day graphic, by the way, the NFL game day account.
Yes,
when they
that's the
tweet
one.
out the graphic.
Yep.
That's the. I'm still getting notifications on
Thank
Instagram
you.
from that from last week.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And last but not least, check out Nick Shook every Sunday night on the Flagship Podcast, where he does a great job helping us out with the game coverage. See you later, bud.
All right, guys. See ya.
All right, there goes Nick Shook. Again, NFL.com/QB Index. Read it every week, and that is a bonus ep of Around the NFL.
No cost.
And a nice little part of ATN history here. ATN when it was a blog or a news thing. And we used to have a lot of QB Index arguments right here on this podcast.
Absolutely. It's a dynasty, and it's in Shook's hands. Till next time, heed the call.